Hello there, good afternoon and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television with me, Cynthia Are. Now we're starting things off looking at security. As the US-led coalition against the Islamic State continues, groups affiliated with the terrorist group are making very dangerous calls. Take the group's affiliate in Egypt, which goes by the name Sinai Province. They're urging followers to attack judges, declaring a new front in an Islamist militant insurgency in the world's most populous Arab state. The leader of the group Sinai Province called for violence against judges in an audio statement posted on a prominent jihadist website. However, the authenticity is being questioned. A spate of attacks on judges suggests they are the latest targets of an insurgency centered in North Sinai that has killed hundreds of Egyptian soldiers and police in the past 2 years. Any full-blown campaign against judges could spell trouble for President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who, as army chief, removed the Muslim Brotherhood from power in mid-2013 after mass protests against his rule. Joining us via Skype from Washington, D.C. is the Voice of America's terrorism and security expert, Jeffery Young. Jeffery, thank you very much for joining us again on the program.
It's a pleasure.
Now, what do we make of this call by the Sinai Province, even though the authenticity is in question?
Well, let's look at this from the insurgents' point of view. Calling for attacks on Egyptian judges, to them, would be absolutely logical. Since the presidency of Mohamed Morsi was upended by the military led by General al-Sisi, the Egyptian state has used its courts to send hundreds of Muslim Brotherhood and other opposition group members to prison. Just recently, the courts sentenced President Morsi to death for his alleged involvement in activities that took place prior to his election. So since the courts have become the instrument of repression by the al-Sisi government, at least in the eyes of the insurgents and the opposition, it would make sense to them to call for attacks on the courts and their judges.
Well, Jeffery, is this call one which the radical groups in Egypt could actually respond to?
As for whether that's possible, I think the answer is yes, because as mentioned before, the courts are such a powerful symbol of the repression of opposition groups. Obviously, the government will significantly beef up its security for its courts and its judges. But the radicals' response to that, logically, would be to mount suicide attacks and other acts of asymmetrical warfare. So yes, I think that this is a call to action that may unfortunately be acted upon.
Now, you know, the Islamic State started as a threat to Iraq and then Syria and then Libya, now Egypt. The group now seems to be gaining more ground despite the US-led coalition. What is missing in this equation to probably stop the spread of the group?
Well, as for the spread of the Islamic State into Egypt, you know, in a sense, it was already there. Not as the Islamic State, but rather as a strong and broad opposition to the secular military governments of Egypt, typified by Hosni Mubarak and others. And with the rise of the Islamic State, this opposition element now gets a perverse benefit, so to speak, of the Islamic State's aggression and viciousness, which regime opponents might consider to be appropriate in the face of al-Sisi and his efforts to crush any and all opposition.
Well, Jeffery, thank you very much for your insight. We're very glad to have you join us on Network Africa. Thank you very much.
Always.
Jeffery Young is with the Voice of America. He's a terrorism and security expert from Washington, D.C. Now to other matters. As Kenya still continues to recover from the last major hit by extremist group Al-Shabaab, the same town which was the venue of the last university attack, which left 148 people dead, has had yet another memory added to its list of horror. Now, local leaders from Garissa town say militants from Al-Shabaab briefly took over a mosque in northern Kenya. The jihadists are said to have addressed the congregation for 2 hours before escaping into a forest. They criticized Kenyan authorities and warned people not to pass intelligence to the security forces. One of the police commanders in the town told a local newspaper that as many as 25 fighters were involved. The commander was also also said that he believed the militants were sent by Mohamed Kuno. That's the man Kenyan authorities have accused of being behind the Garissa University College attack. We're still looking at security, and 10 people were killed and almost 40 wounded when Libya's two rival governments clashed with Islamist fighters in two large cities. Supporters of Islamic State and other Islamist militant groups have exploited the turmoil in Libya, where two governments and parliaments are fighting for control 4 years after the ousting of Muammar Gaddafi. In the eastern city of Benghazi, 9 soldiers were killed when fighting the Majlis al-Shura, an umbrella of mostly Islamist groups, including Ansar al-Sharia, blamed by Washington for the storming of a U.S. diplomatic compound back in 2012, which killed the ambassador. Army forces allied to the internationally recognized government based in the east have been fighting since last year. Islamist groups in the port city. The army has gained some territory, but clashes continue almost daily despite repeated claims by the top army commander that his forces were dominating. We go on a break now on the program. When we come back, the clashes in Burundi continue. Please stay with us.